Stand-up comedy is the personification of science.
Thank you. Good night. My name is Harold Bay.
Hello, my name is Dr. Harold Bays, Medical Director and President of the Louisville Metabolic and Atherosclerosis Research Center located in Louisville, Kentucky. Welcome to this series of YouTube videos entitled The Science of Stand-Up. In this YouTube video, we will be discussing the preparation and beginning of a stand-up comedy routine. As with other YouTube videos on the science of stand-up, this YouTube video explores the integration of the science of stand-up with other sciences. In the past, we explored my bona fides with regard to my comedy and research experience. And then we went on to talk about how the science of stand-up integrated with theoretical physics, the literary arts, psychology, psychiatry, the social sciences, with particular emphasis on racism, free speech, cancel culture, and forgiveness. And then we talked about motivational sciences as it pertains to expectations and objectives. So with regard to this YouTube video, regarding preparation and beginning of a stand-up comedy routine, what are some essential bullet points to consider? Well, first of all, you need to learn your craft. If you're going to be a stand-up comic, you got to learn your craft. You got to develop techniques. Now, the good news is there are a lot of resources to help you do this. I would like to think that the YouTube videos that have been created here might be a good start. But as you are learning on your own, I would encourage you to observe and learn from others. I can't tell you how much I've learned from listening to other stand-up comics or other speakers. And I'm not saying that I've stolen their techniques or stolen their style, but it certainly has pointed out things that I could do to improve me as a stand-up comic or improve my speaking. The next thing to do is keep a journal or a computer file. I can't tell you how many times I'd be driving down the road or I'll be on a plane or whatever, and I'll think of some really good bit. What I used to do when I would think of this great bit, I would be like, this bit is so great, I will absolutely remember it when it's time for me to develop a new routine. And then inevitably, I would forget it. So my advice is, if you're asleep and you suddenly wake up with a great comedy idea, or you're driving down the road and come up with a great idea, or you're on a plane and you come up with a great idea, as soon as it is safe to do so, I strongly recommend that you write it down in a journal or you type it up in some sort of document and keep it saved upon your hard drive of your computer. You're going to need to keep a record. And I have found that to be highly useful in establishing a bank of potential future bits. Once you get the material outlined that you would like to develop into a routine, then you're going to need to practice it. And then you're going to need to practice it. And then you're going to need to practice it some more. You can never get too much practice in developing your comedy routine. Some of the places you can go to, yes, you can do it at your home or in your car or at your work, if they'll let you do that, okay? But it's usually best to get in front of a live audience because that's the only way you're going to really know. And you can do that on open mic nights or sneak it in between material if you're already doing stand-up comedy or ask for a guest set or whatever, but there are opportunities out there to try out new material. And when I say new material, let's be clear what I'm talking about. New material isn't something that you just made up today. New material, I would define as something that you've just written in the past 6 months, maybe even just the past year. Folks, sometimes it takes years to develop a real solid 30 to 40 minutes of material. Sometimes it takes a long time. So, the story goes, I heard Jay Leno talk about this on a talk show once where He had done a stand-up comedy concert, and he said it was new material. He had told the audience it was new material, and he heard back from somebody that said, well, you said it was new material, but I heard you do that same bit, like 3 months ago. And he's like, 3 months ago? That's still new. Okay, that's still new. It's not as though you're going to do a comedy concert, and on the way to the concert, you just suddenly make up, an hour and a half worth of material. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, what other preparations? I have found it useful to review these next 2 slides prior to a presentation or prior to a comedy job. First, avoid needy affirmations. And you hear this all the time. Next time you're on a teleconference or a video teleconference, some sort of Zoom conference or whatever, see how many times you hear this. The speaker will get on the Zoom conference, and after each sentence, they're so needy for affirmation. After each sentence, they'll say, right? Or, does that make sense? So does that make sense? Or, does anybody have any questions? Because there'll be silence on the other end, and it's making them nervous, and they think they're messing up because nobody's saying anything. And they'll say, do you have any questions? Do you know what I mean? Folks, just stop. If you feel compelled to continually ask if you're right, or does it make sense, or do you know what I mean, or do you have any questions, then that suggests you are not confident in what you're presenting. And you sure don't want to do that in a comedy club. Now, again, I'm not saying you can't say these things every now and then if it's for a comedic purpose. I'm just saying the routine use of these needy affirmations after each sentence gets to be very annoying. Next, know your limitations and know your lane. If you are a clean comic and you are sandwiched in between 2 blue comics, don't go blue just because the other people are blue. You don't have to do that. Not necessary. You don't have to be like other people. And know your limitations. If you do the kind of material that's not suitable for high school kids, and somebody's booking a job that's going to have high school kids, well, just decline. Just don't do it. Okay? Don't put yourself in a position to fail. I strongly encourage you to tape or record your performances and then review them and then learn something from it. Don't just sit back and go, I'm amazing. That's not really the point. I mean, you might be amazing, but the point of doing the taping or the recording are to catch on some things that maybe you didn't know what you were doing. Let me give you a perfect example. I've been getting lots of invitations to do lots of speaking, so I thought I was a in-demand speaker. I mean, again, I got invited enough, and so I watched a videotape of me doing a particular presentation, and oh no, I must have said, like 15 times. It felt like 115 times. I mean, that was in just like a 45-minute presentation. And it was just awful. It was distracting, and it was just terrible. I still feel bad about it. And I vowed I was never going to do that again. So right now, I try to limit myself to 2 you-knows per half hour. I would prefer to go through an entire presentation and never say you know, but despite my best efforts, it just sneaks in there. I don't know how it happens, but it does. I mean, I'm much better, but I could still improve. Is another one. I still do that occasionally. I don't do the okay excessively, but there are some times in between segments of presentations and such that I'll say, okay, or so. I still do that, and I don't think it's that bad. Again, I think in those cases, it comes down to excess. I've never been one that's done that, but you've certainly heard speakers that use the word like all the time. Like, this is the reason, like, you want to go to the store, and like, you want to always purchase, like the best, and so on and so forth. But you're only going to probably know that if you listen to yourself and willing to be self-critical of yourself. Here's some words that, again, if they're used in excess, can get really annoying. actually, or basically, or literally. These are types of words that, when used in excess, can become annoying and distracting. And the last two examples would be I mean or for example. I guess looking at this list, what I would say is that it's the excessive use of these fillers that create the most problems. If you use one or more of these every once in a while, I think you're going to probably be fine. Nobody's going to notice. It'd be best if you didn't use any of these, but I mean, I've been giving talks for over 30 years and I still do it, so can't be critical of others. Next, know the anticipated audience. That is so critical. Whenever I do comedy jobs or whenever I give talks, I always want to know who I'm talking to, because sometimes you get surprised. You go in thinking it's going to be one type of audience and it's somebody else. So it doesn't take much effort to figure out, or to at least ask, who's going to be in the audience. Know the venue. Is it a club? Is it a hotel room? I was in a hotel room once. This was I was giving a presentation. I wasn't doing a comedy job, but I was at this hotel. It was Sunday morning. Walls were paper thin. I got up to give my presentation. And in the hotel room right next to where our room was, broke out a revival. It was gospel music with organs and such. And the chorus was going crazy, and they were very good. It's just hard to give a compelling discussion of bile acid metabolism when you have, are you ready for a miracle being sung, next door? It can be challenging. Determine if the venue is going to be inside or outside. As I mentioned before, unless you're getting paid a lot of money, really avoid the outside comedy jobs. It's just a monster. Size of the crowd, that's always good to know before you get started. I like to arrive early to the venue and sort of scope out how many people are going to be attending the presentation or attending the performance. Know if it's a benefit or fundraiser. Know if it's a holiday party or an office party. If it's an office party, sometimes you might want to tailor your material to the particular business for which you are presenting. Know if it's a corporate gig or a cruise ship. Now, presumably you would know if you've been booked on a cruise ship. I would think you would have figured that out when you signed the contract. So, but my point is, all of these things matter, and they do make a difference in your preparation. Okay, be organized. Construct and format your content in the manner that is requested. So it doesn't matter if you're a speaker or if you're a stand-up comic. If you're doing a private show or whatever, and they have a particular format they want you to follow, then you ought to follow it. If you start going rogue, you're just going to end up making a lot of people mad, and they may just shut you down in the middle of your routine, and that's not good. That's not good for anyone. Gain experience. When I first started doing comedy, I did whatever I was asked to do, and I would say over 50% were very painful. They were just awful. But it's only through going through that experience and meeting those challenges that I was able to improve when I got to do the easier stuff, which is the stuff in the clubs. What other types of preparation? As I mentioned before, arrive before your presentation. Don't just show up 5 minutes before you're supposed to hit the stage. That's a big mistake, because you don't know all the things that could potentially happen that you could have corrected if you had just arrived a bit sooner. Check out the stage. Find out where you're going to be performing. Ensure the sound and the video systems are working. That if there's a computer involved, that it's working. That the monitor screen is working. Microphone is working. The slide advancer are all working, and you know how to use them. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, but they got audiovisual people and meeting planning people to manage all that. Why is that my responsibility? Folks, because if you're the one doing the performance or you're the one doing the presentation, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters, how did you do? How did you do? Now, if you feel comfortable with saying, well, I did terrible, but it wasn't my fault, great. But how does that help you? You know, maybe if you'd have gotten there a little bit earlier and checked all this stuff out, you could have fixed it all, and then you'd had a good show. And I just think that would be better for all concerned. If you're giving a presentation or you've been asked to do a comedy job and you need some notes because you got some material that they asked you to do, have copies, paper copies of what it is you're going to present available with you in case the computers go down. Also, check your clothes. Nothing is quite disconcerting as walking off the stage and about an hour or two later find that your fly was open. And you're like, oh no, was it open when I was doing stand-up or was it closed then? I just don't remember. And then you get all nervous and worried about it and think maybe people were laughing at you because your fly was open or whatever. Check your clothes, go to a mirror, check your face, go, again, check your clothes, make sure that's all set up, and then you don't have to worry about it later. Make sure people know your name. When you arrive at the venue or you arrive at the club, introduce yourself. Be nice, be cordial, and don't assume people know who you are. Even if it's somebody, even if it's a family member, even if it's a brother or sister, introduce yourself just to be sure. And inevitably, I've done that where I've walked in, hello, my name's Dr. Harold Bays. And they're like, oh yeah, I know who you are. And I could tell they didn't really, but they say that. And it just makes it easier on everybody because not everybody remembers names or faces. People like me, for example, I'm the worst when it comes to names. So I'm always grateful if somebody introduces themselves, even if I kind of know who they are. Be sure you get a timer and have that with you. You can have it as an independent device or you can have it on your smartphone. Now, again, I'm not talking about a stopwatch. Stopwatch is a little too complicated for me. I'm talking about a timer where if you have 30 minutes, you set it for 30 minutes and the time goes down. Now, what you want to do if you have a timer is when it gets to 0, you don't need to be having bells and whistles going off or a big alarm going off. That's not good. Set it up so it just goes backwards in the time so you can see how much time you're over in the event that you do that. But a timer is just, I think it's essential. I have 3 timer apps on my smartphone, and they all have really, really large numbers, so I can see them very easily while I'm presenting or doing stand-up. All right, so let's say you're preparing for a particular type of job, whether it be comedy job or speaking job or whatever, and you're working on it, and you were required to turn something in a couple of weeks before the performance. Folks, just meet the timelines. If you agreed to do a job, agreed to do a comedy show, agreed to do a speaking engagement, then just adhere to the timelines. If you agree to it, then just simply do it. And this just drives, I think, everyone crazy. Once committing to a project, being too busy is a rational excuse only for those under the self-centered delusion that nobody else has anything to do. I mean, I just think that borders on being rude, is to say, well, you don't understand, I'm busy. Well, who's not busy? Do you know of anybody that's not busy? Okay, if you agreed to it, then get it done. And once you start, once you embark upon your stand-up comedy routine, or once you embark upon your presentation, do your time. Do your time. You don't want to go over. You don't want to go under. And you might say, yeah, I have 30 minutes. I'm supposed to do 30 minutes, but the crowd's terrible and they hate me. So I'm going to do like 20 minutes. I'm going to bail and I'm going to dump it on the headliner. You can try that and you'll never work again. Do your time. As painful as it may be, do your time. At the same time, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go over. You don't want to say, well, I'm supposed to do 30 minutes, but oh my gosh, it's such a hot crowd and I'm doing so well. I think I'm going to do 40 minutes. Yet again, that's another way never to work again. It's a good way to make a lot of people very upset because the headliner doesn't want to have 10 minutes taken out of his or her time. So just do what you agreed that you would do and move on. Preparation. Another thing to prepare for is prepare for spontaneity. So if you have a sense there's a high likelihood for hecklers or some high likelihood somebody's going to say something about something, then have some pre-made retorts or replies so that when it happens, and it will happen, that it makes it look like you were spontaneous. We talked about that before, pseudo-spontaneity, where it looks like you're being spontaneous, but you actually really prepared for it. And that only comes with experience to develop those sorts of techniques as you do comedy. Okay, so now you've done your preparation, you've hit the stage. Now what do? I think you should always introduce yourself. I do that with stand-up jobs. I do that with speaking jobs. Even if I have just been introduced. Even if they say, "Welcome to the stage tonight, Dr. Harold Bays," then I will walk up and say, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Harold Bays, and then I'll go a little bit through my biography. I will reintroduce myself. I think that's helpful for name recognition, but I think it also helps introduce yourself to the audience. Early on, I think I would advise establishing your persona. Now, hopefully you've seen some of the prior YouTube videos, but developing that persona is just critical if you're going to be a successful stand-up comic. And I would recommend that you learn as quickly as possible, what is your persona? What is it? What sort of stand-up comic do you want to be? What sort of stand-up comic is most comfortable for you and your personality? Now, I say do it as quickly as possible. In fairness, it took me about 3 years. It took me 3 years to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. Maybe that's a little excessive, but it just took me longer than most people. But you got to, once you figure out who you're going to be, then that's got to be displayed to the audience and very quickly, like right from the beginning. Let people know what your shtick is going to be so they know what to anticipate. Another thing to do as quickly as possible is if you've got a callback that you're going to be using, and as you recall, callback is a repetitive statement or mannerism or something that goes throughout your entire routine. That was discussed at length in the definition section of the Science of Stand-Up YouTube videos. But if you have a callback, introduce that early on so people can start to get the sense about what it is that you're doing. Now, you could start your routine with what everybody else starts with. You could get up there, and after they introduce you, you could look at the audience, you could say, "How are you all doing tonight?" And you could do that. I'm of two minds about this. For me, I guess you can see my main mind on this. I got a big red X over here, so I think it's a bad plan, just because everybody does it, but that's just a subjective opinion. Objectively, some of the best comics out there still say this. They still say it. So if it works for openers, middles, headliners, and some of the top comics on the planet, then why can't you do it? And I don't have any rational reason why you can't. I think it's better to get up and introduce yourself and start up with the other techniques that I described, but a lot of comics do this. I don't think it's terribly original and it doesn't set you apart, but it seems to work. So again, two minds on my part. An alternative is to take a poll. I've done that many times. So other people say, "How are y'all doing tonight?" Me, I'll get up there and I'll take some sort of poll from the audience. And that's just another way to kind of get the audience going early on. And it avoids having to say, "How are y'all doing tonight?" which accomplishes the same thing.
like to take a little poll here to see kind of how stressed out you are. By applause, how many people out here think you work too damn hard for the amount of money you make? How many applause? How many people out here thinks the government takes way too many taxes out of their paycheck every month? Well, then you people are stressed out. And I'm going to teach you how to deal with stress. What you do is if you've got a problem, you don't face the problem. You don't talk about the problem. You simply look that problem, that person right in the eye. And you say, hey, 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 hey. And you'll feel much better. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. In January of 1989, 2 American jets shot down 2 Libyan jets, at which time Muammar Gaddafi came up with this disturbing quote that I think will forever change our lives. If America has prevailed because it is technically superior in the sea and the air, it will surely be defeated on the land. For we, as well as the fish, await them. How many people like look Muammar right in the eye? Say, hey, 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 hey! What the hell are you talking about? Well, me as well as the fish. Colonel Gaddafi, Captain Flipper, Sergeant Shamu, what are we dealing with here, folks?
Another way to start out as you're building your persona is self-deprecating humor. I think that is just so effective. It's so reliable. Self-deprecating humor at the beginning, very reliable, and it sort of endears yourself to the crowd and such. So a lot of advantages to self-deprecating humor. The only caution here I would say is not too much. Don't go too much into detail about this, because then it just looks pathetic. I mean, you don't want to get up there and say, I'm up here tonight, I'm a horrible looking human being or whatever. I mean, you can make some minor comment about your appearance or whatever, but just not too much. Or if you have an accent, you're from a particular part of the country, or you're from overseas or whatever. And so, for example, you may not know it, but okay, I'm from Southern Kentucky, and I might initially say something like, well, I bet you folks are glad to see me here tonight because I'm one of the few presenters that you're going to hear that doesn't have an accent. And of course, the people from the Northeast really like that because they think those of us south of the Mason-Dixon line are a different species and whatnot. But I'll end it there. I'm not going to carry on after that with incest jokes and all that kind of ridiculousness. So self-deprecating humor is fine. Just don't take it too far. Then next, it's good if you can to comment on the venue. And I've done that many times. That's helpful whether you're doing stand-up or whether you're doing presentations. Comment on the venue. But yet again, there is some caution here. I was invited to do a presentation somewhere up in the mountains or hills or whatever you call them there in Colorado, and they said, we really want you to speak. Would you do this? Would you do this? I said, I don't really want to. And they're like, no, it would just mean so much. I'm like, okay. Well, as it turns out, when I paid for the flight, and when I paid for the hotel, and when I paid for the rental car, the amount that they were paying me was far less than my expenses. Far less than my expenses. And because I had to get there through a connection flight, the whole trip ended up taking 3 days of my life. 3 days away from my family, 3 days away from work. So I am losing a fortune. I am losing a fortune just to do a favor from someone. So that's what I have on the slide here. Never do favors for other people. People ask you to do a comedy job as a favor, and you're going to be losing money and time, and it could potentially go really bad. It's best just to say no. Right? It's best, rather than be resentful. That's in nobody's interest. Just say no. Well, I didn't say no. And so when I got to the place in Denver, the Denver airport, I had to drive 2.5 hours to this resort place high in the, again, mountains or hills or whatever they call them there in in Denver, and I couldn't find the hotel because the hotel sign was covered with snow. And I tried to call them, but apparently at these resorts, they close at 6 o'clock at night, which is extraordinary to me. So it took forever to find a place. I was frustrated. There were plenty of other people I could hear talking in the hallway. They were equally frustrated. A lot of people very unhappy with having it at this particular resort. I mean, I understand. I'm sure there was great skiing or whatever, but I wasn't there for the skiing. I was there for a presentation. And I was leaving immediately because even with that, I was losing 3 days. So I got up on the stage, and recognizing people were sort of anxious, sort of nervous because of the frustrations they had about this venue, I said, well, thank you for having me here this afternoon for this presentation. It's quite an honor. I know some people had some difficulty getting here because it's really hard to find and such, but I got to tell you, it's great for me because, well, it might be different for me because I'm in the witness protection program. So my criteria might be a little different than the rest of you. And oh, by the way, the meeting planner people wanted me to tell you this. As it turns out, as good as this meeting place is, next year is going to be even better. So you're going to want to sign up right there in the lobby right now, because I don't know if there's going to be enough opportunities to go. The space may be limited because next year's meeting is in Madagascar. So you're not going to want to miss that. The audience thought that it was funny, but because again, they had frustrations. They had equal frustrations, but the meeting planning people were unhappy. the meeting planner people not very happy with my initial part of my presentation. And as a result, my evaluations were the worst of my entire career. So not only did I lose money, lose 3 days out of my life, but I got horrible evaluations. Despite this failure, it's still a good idea that when you get to a location, ask around, figure out what it is figure out what's common that people would make fun about that particular place, what's odd about the particular venue or town that you're in, and start with that. For example, here in Louisville, we call it Louisville. It's spelled Louisville, but nobody ever says that here. And we have T-shirts that say Louisville and all those types of things. And for reasons that are unclear to me, no matter how many times people make fun of the Louisville name, people still think it's funny. So if a comic gets up and starts making fun of the word Louisville, people love it. I don't understand it. They've heard it a million times. People still think it's funny. But I think it's just more of a sign of respect that you acknowledge that this particular city exists or whatever. I think it's just a friendly expression of respect when you make fun of the city that you're in. Of course, by making fun, I mean something lighthearted. You don't want to say something totally harsh. That's not going to work. And then make sure it's location appropriate. I think I talked about this before in a prior YouTube video. We had a comic come down, did first 10 minutes, did subway material because he was from New York. First 10 minutes of his bit, of his routine, were about subways. Folks, we don't have subways in Louisville. So people just stared at him. And he's like, what's wrong with this crowd? Well, folks, I mean, figure it out. We don't have subways, and you do 10 minutes on subways, it's probably not going to go well. Other cities where I encountered things that I thought were funny, and I wrote them down, and I developed them into bits. And you may recall from one of the introduction YouTube videos that I talked about my encounters at these cities in Las Vegas, in Jacksonville, Florida, Mobile, Alabama, New York City, Baltimore. There's still some cities here I haven't done them in these YouTube videos, but sometimes if I go to these cities, I'll bring them up. And they don't necessarily have to be rip-roaring funny, but there are curiosities in most any city you'll go to. And particularly if that curiosity happened to you, and you can tell it from a first-person perspective. I was driving in from, I was taking a some sort of car. I don't know if it was Uber, Lyft, or car, whatever, from the Denver airport to downtown Denver. And on the main road there, you pass by a prison. And there's a sign on the roadside of this big wall that separates the prison from the highway. And the sign says, "Do not pick up inmates from the emergency lane." That's something that you can develop into a bit if you're in Denver. Newark. I was there when they were renovating Newark Concourse C. And while they were renovating Newark Concourse C in the dead of winter, I had to go to the bathroom. I said, "Where's the bathroom?" They said, "It's outside." I'm like, "What?" So they had shut down all the bathrooms. So I had to go sort of this makeshift steps and such, these metal steps, and I had to go outside into one of these portable bathrooms. I mean, I'm surprised it didn't have a half moon on it. So I'm from Kentucky. Having outhouses is something for which I'm familiar. And so you can see how that could be developed to a bit. As in Oklahoma City, going through security. And this guy, you know, sometimes you wonder what people are thinking. This guy had to have his luggage checked there because apparently in his carry-on bags, as it was going through the security belt and such, apparently in his bag he had a blender with these blades of death right there in the blender, and they had to question him about why he would. I don't know if he bought the blender there at the airport, or if he just purchased it like before he came to the airport. I don't know what he was thinking, but who takes a blender for their carry-on? I don't know. New Orleans. I was being driven by a cabbie there in New Orleans. From the airport to my hotel, the very nice taxi driver asked me what hotel I was staying, and I told him, like, "Yeah, you don't want to go a block away from your hotel." And I was like, "Well, how come?" He goes, "Because you'll get killed." I was like, well, great to have welcome wagon here in the for the taxi experience. So again, that can be developed into a bit. It's in Boston. He asked me where I'm from. I said, "I'm from Louisville." He goes, "Louisville?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's where I'm from." He goes, "Oh, yeah, I've been to Louisville. I was there 20 years ago. Used to bet on the ponies." Okay. He goes, "Yeah, one time I bet on the pony there, and you know what happened?" I'm like, how would I possibly know what happened to you 20 years ago if you went to Churchill Downs and bet on the ponies? How would I know this? But I didn't say that. I was nice. I'm like, "You know what? I don't know what happened." He says, "Yeah, I bet on the ponies. He's still running." Started laughing like the penguin from Batman or whatever. And of course, the implication of the joke was he went there 20 years ago and bet on the pony, and the pony was so slow that it's still running 20 years later. That was my interpretation of the joke. So those are examples of experiences that can be worked up into a routine at the beginning of a set at various different cities and such. And my guess is you've also had those experiences, or you will have those experiences, maybe on the very day or the very week for which you're performing. And this applies even internationally as well. There are things that you can start off either a comedy routine, or you can start during a presentation. I was in United Arab Emirates, and I was looking at the buildings. They got English names and they got Arabic names. I was like, wow, I can't believe it. They put the English names first. I said, you would think in the Middle East, particularly sometimes not so friendly with the U.S. and such, that they would have put the Arabic names first. Well, I asked the driver why they did that, and the driver says, because our language is in Arabic, and for us, we read from right to left, even though you read from left to right. So as far as the folks there at United Arab Emirates were concerned, their name was first. I think this is kind of metaphor for world peace. I mean, here we had the English names and the Arabic names, and everybody thought they were first, at least according to their culture. I was on a flight going to Beijing, okay? This is just an example where sometimes it's best when I have things that I think about that I don't say them out loud. I try to be cautious about just blurting things out, lest I look like more of a fool than I already am. I'm getting ready to board a plane to Beijing on an airline called China Airlines. And as I'm looking at the other passengers, I say to myself, well, man, sure are a lot of Asians on this flight. I'm just glad I never said anything. I'm still embarrassed that these things enter into my head. Similarly, I was in Barcelona, Spain. Barcelona. And I looked at the alleyways and the scooters and architecture, and I said, man, this looks so European. And then seconds later, I was like, man, you're an idiot. I was on a flight to Istanbul, and we got there on time, but they kept us at the gate, wouldn't let us deplane, and they kept us there for like 45 minutes, and I missed my connection flight to Istanbul at the JFK airport. So I went to go book a different flight, figure out how they were going to get me to my destination, and this flight attendant just starts yelling at me. And I was like, why are you yelling at me? I said, you're going to have to calm down. I said, I didn't do anything to you. You're the ones that kept me at the gate. All I'm trying to do is rebook my flight. I don't know why you're yelling at me. And so she seemed to see my logic, and she calmed down. And so she went ahead and booked me another flight to get to Istanbul. And behind me was a girl, a college woman, and she also had been on the same flight as mine, was also trying to get to Istanbul. And I said, well, can you help her out? Because, well, she doesn't really have status with the airline. I said, I know that, but can you help her out? She just wants to see her family. And she said, okay, I'll see what I can do. Well, I get to the gate and on this alternative flight, and I get a phone call from one of the red phones. And they're like, yeah, well, Dr. Harold Bays, please pick up the phone. I'm like, oh, no. So I go up to the gate agent. I said, I just got this emergency call, and it was that doggone flight personnel, the attendant that was helping us rebook the flight. And this flight personnel looked at me or got on the phone and said, I just want to let you know I was able to get that girl to her family. I just want to let you know that. So I guess she felt kind of bad. And I said, well, thank you very much. That was a very nice thing for you to have done. And then when you know it, I go to Paris, and then I go to Istanbul. And when I arrive, I have no idea where I'm supposed to go. Couldn't find how to get to my driver. I was lost. And who was there that I would find to help me? But this girl who had been rebooked on an entirely different flight with entirely different connections, who just happened to run into me at the Istanbul airport. And she helped me get to where I needed to go. So again, you can kind of see how stories like this, particularly if you're doing a presentation or a humor presentation, can be effective. Same sort of thing with the trip I was in Taiwan. I was in Taiwan, and I couldn't figure out how to get to my hotel. There was nobody there to pick me up. I'm like, oh, great. And I didn't have any Taiwanese currency. So I went up to I was going to get a bus. So I went up to the counter there to get some Taiwanese currency, and this woman asked me where I was wanting to go, and she started talking Taiwanese to the person behind the counter, and she hands me a ticket. I'm like, what's this? She goes, well, it's a bus ticket to your hotel. I'm like, well, where do I pay for it? She goes, don't worry about it. I'm like, no, I am not, no, under no circumstances am I going to have you pay for my ticket. So I just, I had a wallet and had some 20s, $20 bills. I'm like, how much money can I give you? She would not take my money. What a horrible thing to do to somebody. I'm like, no, you must take my money. So because she would not take my money, and because I felt so guilty, I had this big sort of weight on my shoulder that I carried for months until I was in New Orleans at an American Diabetes Association meeting, and got into this cab. Right next to me was this huge wallet. I think it was like this big. Had no money in it, but it had tons of credit cards and pictures and everything else imaginable. And I said, what's with this wallet? And the cab driver really didn't respond. And I said, well, okay, who were the last people in this car? And he says, well, they went into Tiffany's. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to find the owner of this wallet in Tiffany's. So then I thought to myself, wait a minute. Do you remember what hotel, the hotel she was staying? I go, yeah, I know what hotel I picked her up. I'm like, okay, take me there. And I paid the extra fare and whatever, and went to the hotel, took in the wallet, got a hold of the manager, found out that, yes, the person's name in the wallet was the name of somebody that was staying there. And I just told the manager, just tell her somebody found her wallet, went to the hotel, left it for her. And instantaneously, that weight was removed from my shoulder. So these are the types of stories, yet again, that you can tell prior to a presentation or to a humor performance that I think have some meaning, particularly if the particular people there in the audience have some background that would be consistent with the story that you're telling. I guess the last one would be I was in France, Paris, France. Took several Ubers. When I first got to France, my Uber rating was 4.9. When I got back, my Uber rating was like 4.7, which means I must have gotten several one-star rating. And what is it that I did that was so horrible? Well, it's because I flew into Paris. It was a 9-10 hour flight. And once I arrived, I immediately got to my hotel. I did my presentation. I don't think I got any sleep. Got back in the car to go back to the airport. And as I was in the Uber car going back to the airport, I was tired. So I wasn't mean or anything. I just didn't talk a lot. And the most I said was, how long is it going to be till we get to the airport? Things like this. The conversation was not adversarial. I wasn't rude. I wasn't doing anything bad to the car. It's just that I was quiet. Well, I subsequently learned that Uber offers a quiet mode. So you don't have to talk to the driver, but it will cost you extra. Well, I didn't pay extra. And so I got really, really crummy ratings from Uber. And that's the reason I predominantly take Lyft now. I just don't think I should be required to pay money to an Uber driver and entertain them. Now, that's not to say I won't take Uber again. I will. I'm just going to have to learn to work up a routine. So the next time I get an Uber, I'm thinking about, doing a refrain from HMS, Pinafore or something, where I get in the car and I'm like, I'm very well acquainted with matters mathematical. I understand equations, both simple and quadratical. About binomial theorem, I am teeming with lots of news, with many cheerful facts about the square of the hypotenuse. And then I will put my hands up like this, and then I will repeat the last line, with many cheerful facts about the square of the hypotenuse. And hopefully that will be sufficiently entertaining such that I won't get a one-star rating from my Uber driver. All right, what about the content of your material? Now, we're only talking about the beginning here, and the next YouTube video we'll be talking about content, but if you're preparing and starting out, fear the joke. I mean, I know a lot of people tell jokes, and some comics are really good about doing that, but I've just found that telling jokes can be problematic, can be challenging. So just be sure if you're going to be telling jokes and that's your routine that you're pretty good at it. Conversely, I think something else you could do instead of telling a bunch of jokes is if you want something from others, then give something of yourself. And we talked about this in some of the earlier YouTube videos where when I first started out in music, we had a band. It was called Blue Shoes in the Garden. And we derived our name from the fact that there were all these other bands that were something, something, and something else. And I have a whole long story behind it, and you can, if you're interested, you can go back and hear the story. But again, there's a routine in there. There's something funny about that. And if I've given scientific presentations where I'm trying to add some humor, I talk about how this Same sort of concept is applicable to publications I've had, where it's something, then something else, such as adiposopathy, metabolic syndrome, quantum physics, general relativity, chaos, and the theory of everything. It's a knee slapper amongst the scientific folks. Adiposopathy, sick fat, Occam's razor, and the resolution of the obesity paradox. Killer. Alirocumab, decreased mortality, nominal significance, p-values, Bayesian statistics, and the duplicity of multiplicity. A Bayes on Bayes editorial. Just knocks them dead every time. What other things to be cautious about? Well, be judicious, starting with race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or appearance and such. It's just a minefield, particularly nowadays, folks. Got to be careful. Avoid platitudes or condescending phrases to garner acceptance. If it looks like you're pandering to an audience, makes it look like you're inexperienced. You got to be confident. You don't need to be pandering. So here's the startup connection checklist as you are starting your routine. These are just things to check off. You don't have to do any of these. I'm just saying that these are some things to think about. Acknowledge the prior actor speakers. So you're introduced, say, thank you very much. Big hand for whoever it is that just introduced you. That's courtesy, but it also helps warm up the crowd. Thank the club owner or the organization if applicable. If you're asked to do a comedy job for an organization, thank them. That's the respectful thing to do. And again, it helps warm up the crowd. And then you can do specific techniques to warm up the crowd. And I've already talked about what those techniques are. Early on, establish your persona so people know what to expect as you go through your routine. And if you're going to do callbacks, introduce that early on so people know what you're doing. Acknowledge something unique about the location or the city or the venue. I was doing a job with a headliner once where he was in front of a bunch of neurobiologists or psychiatrists or something, and he looked at the piano and started outlining it as though it was part of the brain or something. He had a laser pointer. And, this is the medulla oblongata portion of the piano over here or whatever. Brilliant. It was imaginative, and it was brilliant, and the audience really liked that. Self-deprecating humor, we've already talked about. So, in summary, this has been a YouTube video on preparation and startup or beginning of a stand-up comedy routine. It is one of several YouTube videos examining the science of stand-up. Click on the subscribe button to add this to your YouTube subscriptions. Click on the notification bell if you would like to be alerted to new content. Click on the like button if you like this YouTube video. Click on the share button if you want to share this via email, Twitter, Facebook, and such. And as with other YouTube videos, what I'd like for you to do, what I'm asking you to do, is to comment on this video with a specific focus on these questions. How are you all doing tonight? A good introduction. So you know my opinion. What is your opinion? If so, then for a 3-person comedy show, should all 3 use the same initial approach? And yes, I've seen comedy shows that do that. Every single one, the opener, the middle, and the headliner, all start their routine with, how are y'all doing tonight? How are y'all doing tonight? I will tell you for the 3rd time, it can get old. Okay, can get old. Question number 2. If you are a member of a demographic, then what are the advantages and disadvantages of beginning comedy routine based upon race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, body composition, or appearance? Now, I think I've given you my opinion. My opinion is, I think it's perfectly reasonable to start with an acknowledgement of who you are, what you are, where you're from, these types of things. Many times, people are going to wonder till you tell them. So it may be advantageous to just get that out of the way from the beginning. So I see a lot of advantages in acknowledging those things that are unique about you, unique about your persona, and get that out there. And then afterwards, you can determine whether your persona is just going to be solely based upon your race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, body composition, or appearance. But even if it's not, even if your persona is something totally different, acknowledging these things sometimes can, again, endear yourself to the audience and really make a connection with the audience. So thank you again. My name is Dr. Harold Bays, Medical Director and President of the Louisville Metabolic and Atherosclerosis Research Center. And you've been watching yet another YouTube video on the science of stand-up.